Pandemic of the tourism and event sectors will continue. Please ensure that mobile phones have been switched to silent and that background noise is minimised. I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. We wish to welcome any members of the public that are watching via the live broadcast. I'd like to introduce my committee members that are present with us here today. Mr. Lee Lamas, Mr. David Davis, Ms. Wendy Lovell and Mr. Tim Quilty, who's also online. To witnesses presenting today, all evidence taken at this hearing is protected by parliamentary privilege and as provided by the Constitution and further subject to the Legislative Council standing orders. Therefore, the information you provide during the hearing is protected by law. However, any comment repeated outside the hearing may not be protected. Any deliberately false evidence or misleading of the committee may be considered a contempt of Parliament. All evidence is being recorded. You'll be provided for proof version of the transcript following today's hearing. Transcripts will ultimately be published on our committee's website. We welcome your opening comments, but ask that you keep them to a maximum of 5 to 10 minutes to allow plenty of time for discussion and questions. Could you begin by presenting or telling us your name for the Hansard and then start your presentation? Over to both of you.
Thank you. My name is Richard Dexter, Director and Festival Director of Ballarat Festivals Proprietary Limited and Festival Enterprises Proprietary Limited. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to address this panel. I'd also like to acknowledge the Victorian Government's initiatives in handling this pandemic. However, it has come at great cost to industries and businesses such as ours. A brief history of the Ballarat Beer Festival, if I may. The festival has been running annually for 10 years with support from the Ballarat City Council. I took over the festival 6 years ago with the objective of promoting primarily Victorian independent craft brewers and secondly, Australian-owned independent craft brewers, thus making the Ballarat Beer Festival regionally unique and known to the brewers as the premier event in Victoria and in some brewers' opinions in Australia. Events such as ours are a high-risk endeavour where operators risk large sums of money in promoting the events months ahead of the event day as well as funding the infrastructure in advance. Coincidentally, in 2021, our organisation did not receive any JobKeeper or Victorian Government COVID grant funding. The funding risk was entirely borne by our organisation. For February event, we normally commence planning and marketing at least 6 months in advance. We were unwilling to do so for the 2021 event due to uncertainty resulting from the second Victorian lockdown. It appeared by December 2020 that the emergency had passed and our February events, the Ballarat Beer Festival on the 20th of Feb and the Funk and Fest Music Festival on the 21st of February, looked highly likely to proceed. Accordingly, we commenced the sale of tickets on December 17, 65 days prior to the event date. We submitted our COVID-safe plans for both events around the 7th of December, 10 days prior to the commencement of ticket sales. It should be noted that these plans required approximately 80 man-hours to compile with no assistance from the Victorian Government. By way of comparison, a COVID-safe plan for a Queensland event is completed with assistance from the Queensland Government within hours. Recognising that commitment, our frustrations began when neither the DHSS nor the DJPR provided any response for over 8 weeks. We could find no way to contact the responsible authority for a status check. With no response from aforementioned departments, we decided to pursue the Ballarat Beer Festival, but to cancel the Funk and Fest and another beer festival planned for Mornington in April, foregoing over $350,000 in revenue. In desperation, I sought the counsel of Miss Juliana Addison, our local member for Wendouree, who prompted a response from the responsible authorities and ministers. I believe that without Miss Addison's intervention, we would have had to cancel the remaining beer festival. Briefly, our timelines were as follows for the February 2021 festival. Early December 2020, submitted COVID-safe plans for the Ballarat Beer Fest and Ballarat Funk and Fest. January 5th, wrote to Juliana Addison expressing our fears and dismays at zero response from DHHS and DJPR. Juliana then commenced her investigations February 5. Initial review of COVID-safe plan by event assessors with minor modifications required on February the 5th. However, a maximum patron limit of 2,000 people was imposed at that time. February 17, at approximately 10 p.m, verbal approval provided by Juliana Addison.
February.
I'm sorry?
February, what date?
February 17.
17.
At 10 p.m. And it was provided by Juliana Addison and infrastructure was rolling in at 6 a.m. the next day, with the official approval received at 10:55 at night via email. Please note that the event permit from City of Ballarat and the liquor licence from VCGLR were contingent on this approval being received. The 5-day lockdown on the 12th of Feb severely impacted ticket sales, as can be seen in the first graph of our submission. And you just see it flatlining there, and consumer confidence severely waned post-lockdown. We had kept ticket holders and target market informed as best we could of our progress towards COVID-safe certification, but it was extremely difficult to rebuild the ticket sales momentum due to the lack of certainty caused by last-minute government decisions. Graph 1 shows the dramatic pause in sales at lockdown, and Graph 3 shows the huge increase in non-attendance by patrons who had purchased tickets, mostly due for fear. The lack of metrics provided by the government and conflicting social distancing rules caused immense confusion among the ticket-buying public. For example, the Tennis Centre had a 50% occupancy rate for inside a building. We were forced to have a 10% occupancy rate in open air, 2,000 people maximum in a 20,000 square metre spot. I assume everybody's got the submission in front of them.
Yes.
That's mine keeps falling off.
No. Thank you, Richard, for the informative. And the graphs did assist. I could see the drop-off in attendances comparatively to previous years. Very helpful. And also the lockdown in terms of the effect on ticket sales. I might start off by going to Mr. Davis, if he's would like to ask the first couple of questions for the committee, and then I'll go to Mr. Talamas to follow Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis?
So, if I can just get to one of the key issues I think that is developing as we go forward, and that is the inability to get a straight and clean answer out of the Department of Health. So people put in material by email, there's no direct communication.
No.
Have you ever spoken to the Department of Health people by phone? Or
only towards the very end.
Towards right at the end?
There was no contact number or a generic email address.
So they rang you right near the end. But
after Julianne Addison pounded on a few doors.
Monstered them.
Yep.
Yeah. Tried to force them to come out from under their rocks. But this I think is a big problem. I mean, we've heard, and it creates huge uncertainty. You can't be, forgive me if I'm paraphrasing this, but tell me if I'm wrong also, you can't be going forward with an event and having these last-minute notifications or changes or, you're sort of basically waiting for the emperor to give the thumbs up or the thumbs down, but meanwhile you've got all your money in the thing's burning.
All the money is committed, and had the lockdown been for 15 days instead of 5, we would be bankrupt, basically.
Yeah.
Could I add to that? For the record, my name is Janusz Zak. I'm a director of Festival Enterprises. We were collecting ticket fees from patrons.
Yep.
We would have to refund those fees as well. So there's a cost to refund. So we would have been out of pocket just to return money to patrons, because our stated policy was to refund in the event of festival cancellation due to COVID. So we were taking on quite a risk just selling.
But if you could have gone in and seen a member of the Departments of Health's, particular staff and actually had a direct discussion about these matters, you could have adjusted your thing at an early point, made it compliant with whatever tweaks they wanted, and then gone ahead with some level of assurance.
And also, if we had a set of metrics we could work by, so if we get this many COVID cases, then this is going to happen. If we're going to get X, Y amount of cases, then that Z will happen.
I think we were taking the risk, but we evaluated the risk. We took a measured approach to this. But it's the patrons that purchased the tickets that had no way of telling, was the event going to happen, if it wasn't going to happen. We were keeping them informed rather than the government keeping them informed. So we were trying to keep them abreast of where we were in the process.
With huge uncertainty.
With huge uncertainty. But we had to tell them what we knew. So we were making the effort.
So, and then with the caps that were put on, 2,000 at any one time, was that the number? Yeah. But you've got that over quite a big area.
20,000 square metres.
Yeah, like it's, but you're allowed to have 60, 70,000 at the footy.
Yes, correct.
And
the Australian Open had 50% at the same time that weekend, so inside a building.
So the final question to come down underneath this too, did they provide you with any information as to how they'd arrived at these rules and arrangements?
No.
Because they never released, they make the orders, and they've never released the departmental advice or the Chief Health Officer's order brief or the Minister's brief. These have never been put out publicly, but you never got anything like that would have explained and actually enabled you to kind
absolutely.
of negotiate or navigate, perhaps is a better word. Through
Absolutely zip information, other than the ruling.
So we made a lot of our decisions based on publicly available information on the COVID website. And I went through that in some detail in putting the COVID Safe plan together and knew the sources of information, but we had no idea of how that was used to create the decisions that affected the running of the
You didn't actually have the background document to the decision itself.
Yes.
And that would have helped. You would have been able to negotiate your way through, or navigate your way through, is a better word, I think, with a greater understanding.
Yeah. It would have helped us in our communication with the patrons, the ticket buyers.
And, you know, with the closure of your festival, should there be some compensation? So if, next year there was a touch wood, pray, that there's another closure, do you think there should be some support, or can you get insurance for that?
No, there is no insurance.
So we've heard other people tell us, think there should be some fund, or the state government should underwrite, perhaps even with a small levy or something, underwrite a mechanism to give some confidence to people that if there's a cancellation, their base costs might be met.
But personally, I'm reluctant to look at compensation on the basis of, we take a commercial risk, we get a commercial return on that.
Or an insurance model.
Some insurance would be helpful, but I think if we had clear communication of what is the target, what are the risks we are really taking on in a more measured way. So what are the metrics that we're all working to? If we had clear visibility of those, I think then we could insure this event in some way. But the way things were run last year, that no one would insure it.
Shambolic.
It was, there was just no certainty at all. And everyone felt it. Everyone in Victoria felt it.
Might pass over to Mr. Talanis to ask a question if he has one.
Just following up on that point that was raised, in terms of any insurance scheme that would be explored, surely an insurance scheme of that nature would have to be implemented at a national level. The risk of some sort of insurance level at a state level would be that businesses would just simply move their businesses to the state which has an insurance scheme so that they could actually access that system, whereas at a national level it would be
decisions on the closures.
So that wouldn't that pose a risk for the?
Well, some event operators, excuse me, some event operators do operate on a national basis. So, for example, the Red Hot Summer Tour, they're right across Australia, and he's based in Ballarat. So a national insurance scheme would be ideal for him. I don't care where the fund comes from, but I would like some insurance underwriting to occur because there's nothing available at the moment.
Well, what I would fear is that some premium would be put onto each event, and up until the day after the event, we don't know whether we're going to make any money or not, and that would be quite an impost. So that's why I'm really reluctant to say.
It'd have to be a modest levy if it was.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, ticket levy would work easily and easily accounted for. And I think most punters would appreciate that, guarantee their refund. And
Based on revenue
Yeah.
of the ticket. Yeah.
And the other question I had was with regard to the public events framework that the government developed to support the return of events in a COVID-safe manner that was informed by epidemiological information at the time. Did you have any engagement with that framework, or what?
I was actually engaged by the University of Tasmania in the early days and worked with them on the review of the Tasmanian response to COVID-19. So I had a view of the policy, how policy was formed and how it was executed. But I was just lucky to be on that project. I think members of the public wouldn't have had access to that sort of information.
But that Tasmanian one was arguably the best in the country.
yes.
That's what I had put to me, that people say it's a model and could be adopted more widely.
Well, when I was involved, it was a national model. The states kind of went their own way after that point. So this was in the very, very early days. So I'm talking February, March of 2020. So, I mean, the argument is there's fewer people in Tasmania, so it's easier to control crowds.
Yeah, but it's no more dense than in
Ballarat?
Ballarat.
I think the biggest
I
issue,
think Melbourne might be different, but...
Yeah. So if you look at Melbourne, I mean, there's no sort of pockets. It's quite an open space. So people leak. The population leaks between suburbs. You can't lock down to a postcode. You can't. So Tasmania is quite different because of just the geography.
Thank you. I might pass over to Mr. Quelty. He's online with us. He's joined us via Zoom.
Yeah. All right. So would it be fair to say that what you really would like from the government is better communication, faster responses, more information? I don't know, perhaps everyone who puts an application in should have an individual case manager who's managing it and getting back to them so that someone's responsible. Does that sound right, or how would you suggest to handle things?
I think there's just one other point is some metrics around how decisions are made. So we talked about medical evidence, but nothing was presented. And if it's truly medical evidence rather than medical opinion, there would be metrics that could be shared with us. So at what point do postcodes or the state get locked down? What are the metrics to get out of that lockdown? And then a plan to get there, and then performance measures along the way that are shared with everyone. That's really what we're looking for. And then we can inform our patrons based on real scientific evidence rather than guessing and feelings and up until the end of that third lockdown, we didn't know whether we could go ahead or not. We believe we were going to come out of lockdown because I thought it was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction personally, but I had no metrics to judge that on. It was just a gut feeling, and we kept on going on the basis that we would come out. Metrics are very important, I think.
Okay. And do we have any, I don't know, you probably don't answer, do we have any response to how long departments have taken to process applications and so on? Do we have any information about that? Probably you don't have any idea about that.
I think
you've given us a very detailed timeline.
Yeah.
But I think the thing is we submitted the plan and really heard nothing until the final review. So in that interim, it would be nice to have some gauge of are we going through a process and are we at stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? We know there were stages after the fact, but nothing was communicated to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll get, as a committee, we will have an opportunity to speak to some of the departments in due course through this inquiry. But I'll pass over to my colleague, Ms Lovell.
Thank you very much. And just on your comment on metrics and evidence behind decision making, we've been asking for that for over 12 months now, and we're still asking, and we'll continue to keep asking the government for that on your behalf. Also, your difficulty in getting your approvals through. You're not on your own. That's happening to events all over the state, and there's been some from up my way that the only way we got any movement or any communication out of government was to ask questions in Parliament. And it's just not good enough for your sector. You deserve certainty. But I was just wondering, having run a fairly recent event in the current climate, how your confidence post that event is, as if you were to be starting to organise another event for 6 weeks' time now, how your confidence would be about going into planning for an event. I mean, 6 weeks is obviously not long enough, but I'm just using that as a bit of a...
Well, we
and
are
also, if you could give me, 3 key points that government could do to assist the sector and to give you confidence around planning events.
3 key points.
But tell me about your confidence first.
Okay, confidence level is... well, I'm always a half glass full sort of guy anyway. My confidence level is probably about 60% at the moment. We are talking to other local councils about other festivals. So, yeah, confidence, I'd say 60%. You're sitting about there too, John?
Yeah.
Second key point, decision-making must be much faster from the government's perspective. I mean, it was last October that Pakula and Andrews announced funding for regional events. There's been nothing since that announcement, which makes it very hard to plan any more events in other new events in the regional of Ballarat region anyway. Third point is, well, we've already touched on that, just clear and concise metrics on what will happen when something happens. Give us some clear, detailed instructions on worst case scenarios, best case scenarios, etc. Then we can work towards it.
So that was 2. Faster decisions, clear and concise metrics. What was the other?
Well, following up on the regional funding.
Right. Oh, sorry. Yes.
October to now is a bit long in the tooth to...
It certainly is. So that decision, that announcement was made
October last year,
and you've heard absolutely nothing
No, and the website
at all about how to access
website still
it.
says it's coming.
Right. Thank you.
No,
there's...
follow-up question? Yeah. Well, many of the questions I was going to ask were I guess, already put to you by the other committee members. It was just, I had a broad question about how the Victorian government could redress the uncertainty, but I think John gave the idea of a metrics-based decision-making was, I think, your answer, broadly speaking to that question I had.
I think there are really 4 parts to it. Is 1, explain the metrics and set targets, articulate the plan to achieve sort of revised targets, show progress towards those targets, and then celebrate when you've achieved the target. I think those 4 things it's kind of just a normal decision-making process, and that was lacking through this whole time.
And also be consistent with the rules too. The public gets upset when they see 50% occupancy rate at an AFL venue and 10% at a beer fest.
So a bit of greater consistency you're calling for on those. There was one issue that Mr. Quilty raised, which I thought was an interesting one, because obviously no one could have planned for this global pandemic, but in terms of when applications are in, having a point of contact, like you would with, let's say, a planning process with the council or VCAP, whatever you're saying. So maybe for event organisers to have a point of contact in the government department that can give you updates on how your claim is progressing, if further information is required. I think is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, certainly. And as an example, working with the Ballarat City Councils, as I have for the last 6 odd years, also with the venue I've got up there as well, I argued a couple of years ago to have a concierge appointed, so a one-stop shop, because I've got to deal with 7 different departments in the Ballarat Council just to run an event. And I was getting pulled in between meetings left, right and centre, and so we had one person in contact. They took the plan to all the different departments, got feedback. So I had one person to deal with at any given time. So it saved me a lot of time and effort.
It sounds like
more efficient.
Yeah, it sounds like obviously for an event, I'm guessing your regulation is covered by, could be food law,